electronic meeting of the Finance Committee. We are meeting electronically due to the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic in accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04. Please note that in accordance with the Governor's Emergency Order, we have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. Instructions are provided on our agenda on the City of Concord's website at concordnh.gov/archive center/view file/item/5511. We are utilizing the Zoom platform for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee have the ability to communicate during this meeting, and the public has access to listen if necessary. Participate in this meeting through clicking on the following website address: us02web.zoom.us/j/827-827-55475. If any member of the public does not have website access, they may dial the telephone number 929-205-6099. If dialing from a landline, you may call in toll free at 877-853-5257. The webinar number ID is 827-8275-5475. If anyone has a problem accessing the meeting, please call 603-230-3718 or send an email to finance@concordnh.gov. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting and have the reschedules at that time. Please note that all the votes are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call. We'll start by taking our roll call attendance. And when you state your presence in the meeting, please also state whether there's anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Mr. LeBrun, would you be the one to call the roll, please?
Gotcha. Councilor Bouchard.
Present, home alone.
Mayor Boulay.
Present in my office alone.
Councilor Champlin.
Actually, Councilor Champlin was with us, and I just got a note that his computer froze up, and he's waiting for it to unfreeze.
Got it. Councilor Fennessy. Councilor Grady Sexton.
I am present. I am in my home with my family.
Councilor Keach.
I'm present, home alone.
Councilor Kennison. Councilor Kretovic. Councilor Kretovic. Councilor Mattson.
I am home alone at my house. My son may arrive at some later date.
Councilor Nyan.
Present in my office alone.
Councilor Pierce.
Present in my office at home alone.
Councilor Rice Hawkins. Councilor Todd.
Here at home alone in this room.
Councilor Warner.
Here at home with my family.
So one councilor absent, two councilors like they're on the call and just not responding. Excuse me, two councilors absent.
But we have 9 present, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a quorum. First thing we'll do is we'll take a motion, if you will, for the approval of the meeting minutes for May 27th.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made second to approve the minutes of May 27th. Is there any changes, concerns, comments? Seeing none. Mr. LeBrun, if you call the roll, please.
Councilor Bouchard.
Yes.
Mayor Boulay.
Yes.
Councilor Champlin.
Yes.
Councilor Fennessy. Councilor Grady Sexton.
Yes.
Councilor Keach.
Yes.
Councilor Kennison. Councilor Kretovic. Councilor Mattson.
Yes.
Councilor Nyan.
Yes.
Councilor Pierce.
Yes.
Councilor Rice Hawkins.
Present in my office alone.
Councilor Rice Hawkins, we're actually voting on the minutes.
Oh. That's what I get for jumping on and hearing my name. I will vote yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Todd.
Yes.
Councilor Warner.
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
I
Thank you very
will
much.
also vote yes. Sorry about that. I couldn't unmute. I'm all set now.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, tonight we are going to be discussing the special revenue funds, including the inspection, parking, airport, conservation, golf, arena, solid waste funds, and then the enterprise funds being of water and wastewater. I will say that I think there was a little bit of confusion, perhaps, whether or not we were holding a public hearing this evening. The answer is no, we are not holding a public hearing. We did not advertise a public hearing, so there will be no public hearing. But for those who may have thought there were a public hearing, I think what we'll do is we'll grant a little bit of leeway. If you showed up and you want to share a few words, that's fine. But we are not going to call the public hearing because we did not properly advertise for it, so it is not a public hearing. Our public hearing will be next Monday, the 7th. That it will be a public hearing, and we'll have a discussion. I want you to think about, as we go on tonight, have a discussion as whether or not you want to adopt or not adopt the budget on the 7th, or would you like to potentially wait to see what legislative action takes place with the state. So as we go on tonight, we'll think of that, and we'll, because I'd like to make an announcement by the end of this meeting as to whether, so the public will know whether we plan on taking action on Monday night or not. That's all. But regardless, the public hearing is Monday night. So I think I've repeated that too many times. I apologize, but we'll just, so from there, Mr. Manager, if you could start by taking us through, starting with the inspection fund.
Will do, Your Honor. You want to be on item number 4, the inspection fund, and you want to be on page 129. And we operate this fund utilizing city staff to perform construction inspection services versus using outside consultants. Revenues expenses are dependent upon construction activity and remain driven by the economy. So the reason we moved to this model is because to have outside inspections done by private companies was really costing private developers too much money. So we found a way to actually try to save the development community some money here. For fiscal year 21, revenues are projected to exceed budget and be short of expense by $41,000. This will basically wipe out the remaining working capital in this fund because it goes up and down based on activity. I'll be bringing supplemental appropriation to the city council once we determine what the final revenues and expenses are going to be, and we'll likely make a transfer from the general fund to cover any shortfall made up. So think about this as funds that come in that help cover general fund staff costs. So sometimes it covers, there's enough revenue to cover it, sometimes there isn't, but overall, over the years, it balances out over time. I'm glad to answer any questions. Well, actually, let me do one more piece. For fiscal year 22, revenues budget to budget are planned to increase $19,000 or 6.6%, while expenses budget to budget are expected to increase about $31,000 or 11%. It's mainly due to wages and benefit costs. Now I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you. And who has questions regarding the inspection fund? Okay. Mr. Manager, if you could take us to the parking fund.
Yes, you'll want to be on item number 5. And in item number 5, parking fund, you want to be on page 133. So we have a lot of details here. The parking fund is obviously taken quite a few hits in revenues this year due to the pandemic. Fiscal year 21 revenues budget to projected, so what we're thinking it's going to come in at down $745,000. Fiscal year 21 expenses budget to projected, so what our estimate's going to be, are down $367,000. That's not enough to make up the revenue shortfall, and this will eat into the working capital, which I'll discuss further when we get into the pro forma discussion. For fiscal year 22, revenues are budgeted decreased by $398,000. We're anticipating an increase in parking revenue only in the second half of this coming year. So we're trying to be conservative with the revenue estimates here. As such, for fiscal year 22, the expenses are budgeted decreased by $290,000, and I'll go into those. The expenses for expense and revenue changes are the major ones are the following, and you can see those in the program change request sections on page 573 and 574 of the budget. if you're looking for the details, but just briefly, the reduction in wages and benefits we've made is $166,500. Reduction of supplies, uniforms, fuel, utilities, taxes, and contracted services, we've reduced that by $130,400. We've increased the cost for snow removal. That's a contracted, well, it's a service that we do. We had a contracted past, now we use general services to do some of this. And that's up $17,400. And that also includes any increases we'd have for wastewater and water. Of course, we're trying to clean the garages more often now that we've done a lot of the repairs. Also increased revenue for supplemental rents, and those are contractual parking encumbrance permits and dumpster pad rentals totaling $211,000. And we've reduced the parking card revenue. This is the money that the state legislature or the state government used to give to state employees to cover their parking costs downtown. That's pretty much been eliminated. So of course that we don't get the parking cards bought because of that. So that's a reduction of $50,000. There's been a lot of work done in this fund from the parking meters to garage repairs. And for fiscal year 22, essentially we're going to regroup and look at everything based on all the revenue losses. I'm glad to answer any questions before I move to the pro forma, if you have any.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Before we take questions, there was a question in the question and answer section of the Zoom call from Mr. Jonathan Smith, asking whether or not he should do an update of the Monkey Around Playground around White Park. I'm going to suggest that he come back for the public hearing next week. And that way, I think they don't have to wait around for all of us to go through all these funds, and you could be closer to 5:30 as we start. So hopefully that's a better use of your time, Mr. Smith, and I hope you heard the answer. So have a great night. Enjoy this wonderful weather. Who has questions for the manager regarding parking? Councilor Fennessy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Manager. I know we've had a lot of conversations in the parking committee with respect to the shortfalls in revenue, both this past fiscal year and what's anticipated in the upcoming one. Have we looked at all of the potential expenses that we could reduce? And are there any other things we should be considering to get this closer to balanced? Obviously, being balanced is not very realistic at this point, but we're still looking at pretty significant deficit in this fund.
The way we've looked at this is if you make any other reductions, essentially you'd be also cutting revenue at the same time. So essentially, if you do something with staffing or any ability to collect additional dollars, then as you continue to cut those expenses, you need to then cut the revenue, and it's really not going to get you anywhere. So I think we've looked at, given what we can see right now and based on the information we have, we think we've made all the reasonable expenses we can make without cutting into the revenues, which then means further cutting into the expenses.
All set? Okay. Councilor Pierce?
Okay, can I talk about uncollected parking fines now?
Absolutely.
All right, good. I keep trying to talk about it. Explain to me again, and perhaps this is a question for Mr. LeBrun, why we don't book the uncollectibles as receivables in this budget?
We've had this discussion a number of times over the years, and also discussed this with our auditors. And under generally accepted accounting principles, the recording of fines for parking fines would not be recorded in revenue until it's actually received. As you can see, there's a high probability of of not collecting some of these revenues. A lot of these parking revenues are very delinquent. It's very difficult to collect them. So we would definitely be overstating our revenue if we booked them as revenue. If we were to book them as revenue, we would actually take the approach of having to also book book an allowance to them, exactly the same amount of money, so you wouldn't gain anything by doing it, because it's a very high probability of not collecting a lot of that revenue.
Follow-up, please.
Please.
So is there any way we can look at a report on the parking revenues and expenses to see what there is outstanding in uncollectibles?
I would actually have to defer to Mr. Walsh to talk about the details of what is available. I believe that there is obviously the details are available, but I would have to defer to Matt on that.
So I guess, Mike, just a follow-up. So there is no line item anywhere that we can see in the budget to track whether or not we're making progress in collecting, or the fund is just, the uncollectible number is just getting larger.
There's not a line item in the budget, and nor have we ever put that in, nor would we, that you would be able to track it that way. It would be a subsequent report that would have to be tracked accordingly, and that's done on an administrative basis right now with Mr. Walsh and his staff.
Okay, I don't need the answer right now. I'm happy to work with the parking committee, and
okay.
And I know I'm a bee in Mr. Walsh's bonnet when it comes to this, so I was just wanting to see a number that we could track easily. But
we wouldn't put it on the financial statements.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Further questions regarding parking? I have tried to flip through House Bill 2 really quickly, but just kind of FYI, in House Bill 2, there's over 445 sections or so. And there is a section which grants the authority, I believe, to administrative services to purchase parking cards for employees. So it doesn't give a number, obviously, and it's up to the discretion. But I think in terms of revenues, there may be, they have the authority to do it, just FYI.
Thinking what would most likely happen is people still need to park. So whether it comes in through his parking cards, or essentially is the state paying for the parking for the employee sometimes, or the employee itself is paying for the parking to park in the garage or park on the street, the money comes in. It just wouldn't probably come in as the parking card unless they appropriate specific dollars for that.
But it's just been my experience that if the state is paying for it, they park in the garage. If the state is not paying for it, they tend to park in the neighborhoods. And so there's no revenue.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else parking? Okay. Not seeing anyone else. Then let's move on to the airport fund, please.
Would you like to take a look at the pro forma? I
jumped ahead, so yes, the pro forma.
Okay. I didn't do that yet. So go back to item number 5, and you'll see there's a tab, parking fund pro forma. And if you go to the bottom line of the page, we'll just cover the bottom line. The first column of numbers is fiscal year 21. It shows the budgeted loss of $102,000. That was the budget. The second column is projected number that shows an estimated loss of $480,000 or $378,000 worse than budget. And this loss can be absorbed by the $618,000 that's in the working capital, but it only leaves $138,000. The next column for fiscal year 22, we're budgeting a loss of $210,000. And that wouldn't fully be absorbed by the remaining working capital, and we'll need to address that as we go forward, depending on what happens with the parking fund. Again, we're being conservative with the revenues, but that's the way the parking fund's looking right now. Glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Manager, I apologize. Where would I find the pro forma?
If you're looking at your budget, it'd be at the end of the budget, very, very last tab.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, and they're all there.
Got it. Thank you. Anyone have any questions on pro forma? Okay, seeing none, I guess we'll move on to airport then.
Okay, you want to?
I had a quick question. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Mr. Council Fennessy.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I'm looking in the future years. It looks like we're still going to have a deficit in the parking fund. My assumption is that the projected deficits in the future are related to some capital costs that we expect to incur. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. It's highly capital intensive. Think of it really as the water and wastewater plants, in that you have facilities that are decades now old that need improvements. Some of them have undergone some major improvements, but even Capitol Commons is over 10 years old now, and you need to do a lot of seal work that needs to get done, a lot of concrete work. So you constantly have to stay on top of this, and particularly keeping the lighting up to the standards that people want. It gets expensive over time.
Council Champlin?
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, Mr. Espel, isn't it fair to say that our goal, which we were moving towards fulfilling prior to COVID-19, kind of threw a spanner in the works, was to create a reserve fund in the parking fund, or a surplus, so that we could apply it to some of those longstanding infrastructure needs?
That's correct. You were well on your way to doing that until COVID hit. It was generating the money that you needed, and remember, you wanted to start looking at having additional services provided to the neighborhoods to take a look at the impact of parking moving into the neighborhoods, as the mayor had stated. But because of COVID, the whole game has changed. So we're essentially have to do a reboot and look at this and see what types of revenues you will have coming in, and at the same time keeping the facilities up to a good standard. They are at a good standard now, but you need to keep them there. And they weren't for years because we didn't have the money to do that. We were just getting our stride until COVID hit.
Great, thank you for putting that in context. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Manager, moving on.
So next you go to item number 6, which is airport fund. Now, the airport fund, you want to be on page 138. And on page 138, you'll see for fiscal year 21, the projected revenues is slightly short of budget by $12,000. Expenses are under budget by $11,000. For fiscal year 22, revenues budget to budget are down $8,000. The expenses budget to budget are up $17,000, and that's mainly due to wage, benefit, and transfer out to capital. We have some tree removal work that we need to continue to do at the airport. The next, and then if you want, I can go, Mr. Mayor, I can go right to the airport pro forma, or do you want me to pause here?
Why don't you do that?
Okay. So if you look at the airport pro forma, you'll see for fiscal year 21 budget to projected, the budget projected an $86,000 loss. That's what we actually budgeted. The next column is the estimate, which shows an $88,000 loss. So it's pretty much right on target. For fiscal year 22, we're budgeting a $112,000 loss. The working capital is sufficient to cover it for fiscal year 22, but you can see when we get to fiscal year 25, you're going to go into the negative as we had years ago, and we're going to have to likely support this through the general fund unless something else changes. Be glad to answer any questions.
Questions, anyone? Okay. Oh, Council Fennessy.
Thank you. Quick question. Have we seen any significant impact with respect to usage of the airport as a result of COVID?
Yes. I like Carlos. He handles the, I wouldn't say day-to-day activity up there, but he handles the overall review of that. So, Carlos.
Good evening, Councilor. So yes, we did. We noticed it also in the fuel sales. They were down just because there were far fewer people using planes out of the airport. So that's where we felt the loss. As far as the other leases, which is the main piece of our revenue, that was consistent. People continue to make their lease payments. So it's really that experiential piece of people not actually using the airport for flying.
Was that? Anyone else? All right, Mr. Manager. Mr. Manager, you're on mute.
Too many buttons. Sorry about that. So that's the end of airport. You want to be on a conservation property fund, which is item number 7. And you want to be on page 141. And you'll see that this fund is designed to account for revenues from the leased properties. So conservation pieces that were bought over the years that actually lease out, revenues come in from that. And the acquisition and the management of the conservation properties. So with those revenues, we use those to not only acquire additional properties, but also to manage those properties. So revenues, budget to budget, are up $9,600 due to planned increase in use of fund balance. So we have more work we're going to do. So then, therefore, expenses are up $9,600 because we use this to balance off. It's a transfer line to general fund to offset any debt service for conservation. So when the city council goes and buys a conservation piece of property, you can take the revenue from here to help offset those costs associated with the purchase of those pieces of properties over the years. We'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Who has questions? Anyone? Okay, we'll keep moving. Golf.
Okay. You want to make sure I'm not on mute. You want to be on number 8, golf fund. And you want to be on page 144. And as a general note, now this fund, you've had a lot of concerns over the years because of the financial state it's in. So we have some interesting developments here. As a general note, the golf course has been extremely busy since the course opened last May. It's done extremely well during the pandemic. Kudos to Phil Davis, Director of Operations, Sid Chase, and all the golf staff kept the course in great shape. Continue to make significant improvements, and the members, as far as I can tell, are very happy and they keep returning. For fiscal year 21, budget to projected revenues are estimated to be up $243,000. This is due to a virtual increase in all the revenue categories. For budget to projected, expenses are projected to be up $65,000. And while we'll have a number of unanticipated expenses like boiler repairs, the biggest increase is in pro shop cost of sale. So when we go to buy product to sell, there's a cost associated with that product, but obviously we make a profit. With golf clubs, which has been a large sale, golf clubs, there's a small profit margin on that, but it's still a profit margin. For fiscal year 22, revenues budget to budget are up $78,000. And I've eliminated the annual contribution from the general fund to the golf fund. So that is no longer there. Expenses budget to budget are up $71,000. And while we hope that the good revenues stay for a number of years, I'm very realistic that at least a portion of the increased revenues could be pandemic related. And we feel that could be a leveling off. So we're taking a conservative approach to what our estimates are going forward. So that's to answer a question from Councilor Fennessy before he asks that question. Additional good news is that as of last Friday, Beaver Meadow membership was at the highest that I've seen since my time here in Concord, and I've been here for over 20 years. We have 311 members across all categories. We've also picked up several new outings. The tent is being used for other non-golf related events, and in the course of fantastic shape. And with major improvements on 13 and 14 holes. It shows the decisions the council made a few years back, actually the last several years, to make improvements to the golf course are really paying off. Also noted for fiscal year 21, I'm making an accounting change in how membership revenue is recorded. Currently, the full membership payment is recorded in the fiscal year it's collected. The membership year crosses over 2 fiscal years, so under generally accepted accounting practices and principles, the revenue should be matched its usage. So starting in fiscal year 21, the year that we're in, will split the revenue 45% in the year it's collected, 55% in the deferred to the next fiscal year. And while we'll see the impact in fiscal year 21, I still expect to see solid revenue gain due to the overall revenue increases. So I'll go on to the pro forma, and then I'd like to ask Mr. LeBrun to add a couple of comments, because this is one of those funds where I've always told you that if things change dramatically from the time we put together the budget to the time we have the hearing, I'll fill you in on what those are, and this is one of those situations. So he'll fill you in on that. But if you go to the pro forma, you'll see at the bottom of the page, fiscal year 21 projected net was budgeted to break even. And you can see in this pro forma, we're estimating a gain of $179,000. And that's less the deferment of a portion of the membership revenues, which is about $118,000. So quite a difference from budgeting for zero. For fiscal year 22, the net gain is $7,000. Just following the projected net in the pro forma for fiscal year 23 and beyond, the projected net is negative, and that is with conservative revenue estimates. If revenues hold up, of course, that will change, but we see hopefully this will carry on for a bit. So if I could ask Mr. LeBrun to give us an update as to revenues as of Friday. I think he has the latest as of Friday. That would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. So we took a second look at where we think we're going to end this fiscal year, and when we put the budget together, we thought we were being pretty generous in what we were projecting for revenues, but they've continued to spike as we've gone through this spring. We're expecting that revenues will actually increase by another $212,000 above what we projected. So instead of $1,374,000, it's going to be approximately $1,585,000. So that's a pretty significant revenue gain over what we expected. We do expect expenses to be about $26,000 higher, and that's mainly because of additional cost of sales for pro shop sales. We had planned the pro shop sales. If we ever achieved $130,000, we thought we would be doing a fantastic job. And right now we're projecting that it's going to be in excess of $175,000. So kudos to the team at the golf course. Even after we make the adjustment for the deferred membership revenues for generally accepted accounting principles, we anticipate that our projected net is going to increase from $178,000 to $208,000. So we're still going to have a solid gain above what we had originally projected. So overall, we're still looking at doing better by another $29,000 after these adjustments, and couldn't be happier with the way the golf course is performing and the conditions at the course. And it seems as though membership and also other people who come to play at the course have been making similar comments along with the support from the city council over the past few years, So thank you very much. Glad to answer questions.
Thank you, Council Chair.
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess I was going to ask the Councilor Fennessy question. I hope he doesn't mind. But going back to revenues and looking at the daily fees and car rental revenues, which are the really large increases this year over last year and over projections, I was wondering, and this is either for Mr. Spell or Mr. LeBrun, is this just is your estimate of the reduced incomes, which is about $60,000 in one case and about $100,000 in the other, is that just a gut feeling or like an instinctual, or are you using an algorithm there?
When you say the reduced revenue, can you clarify that part?
Well, I'm looking at car rentals, for example, and I'm looking at the Gulf Fund. This is back on page 144. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at 2021 projections of car rentals, for example, at 245,000, but the 2022 budget estimates 188. And also in daily fees it goes from 512 and projected in 2021 to 413. So that's about $100,000 difference. Just curious as to why you chose those figures.
Sure. So if you can imagine, I'm looking at being conservative, and Councilor Fennessy gives me a hard time about this at the golf course advisory committee meetings all the time, but I'm of a conservative nature when it comes to projecting these revenues. And I'm looking at this pandemic as a blip, so to speak, kind of a one-time event. Hopefully it's not, and hopefully it continues. But if it is a blip and we over project those revenues, then we're going to be in a little bit of a difficult spot in the future, especially if we bring up our expenses to accommodate some of those additional revenues. So I want to make sure that we're being cautious. Now, the way that we projected the revenues is when we met with the Golf Advisory Committee and the City Council also approved, we took a look at revenues, and Mr. Davis has done a fantastic job in his dynamic pricing model at the golf course for greens fees, cart rentals, and all of those types of sales that we have. And so we've increased the rates in certain areas for the busiest times. And so what we did is we actually took the level of play that we normally see, and we applied those increases based on the normal play, not the increased play that we've seen over the past year. So did we use an algorithm? No, I don't think we actually used an algorithm, but I think we took a more conservative approach of looking at what our relative normal play would be, apply the increased revenues for memberships, cart rentals, daily greens fee play, and use that approach to show the increased income. And so that if we end up going back to the regular play model, then our revenues would probably be relatively on target. If we continue to see the increased play that we've been seeing, obviously our membership revenue is way up. If we continue to see that increased play, then the fund will be in that much better shape and better able to support some of the other infrastructure needs that we need at the course.
That's great. Thanks so much for that explanation. And it certainly makes sense. Thanks.
I'm going to assume that you called on me, Mr. Mayor. Well, thank you everybody for asking my normal question. So I'm just going to provide a couple of comments instead. One, thank you very much to Phil and to Sid Chase. I've been very impressed by what's gone on in the last year plus now at the golf course, and I think they've been doing a fantastic job. My second comment would be certainly I hope this is not just a blip, but I'm glad that we're budgeting based on the idea that it might be. And my third comment would be I hope to the extent this is a blip that we take advantage of some of these excess revenues, and hopefully if we do even better than we're budgeting for, we can take some of that additional revenue and use it to implement the recommendations that have been made by the USGA with respect to various course improvements.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Councilor Keach.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to acknowledge the good work that former Councilor Mark Cohen did years past, because he really had some good vision and truly treated this like a business and realized that an investment in the business would realize a return. And I think we're seeing that now.
Thank you. Councilor Todd.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just, right on the heels of that, I want to agree that this has been, I think, a series of a lot of hard work put in by lots of different people, the Golf Advisory Committee and all of the folks working at the golf course, the pro, all of the thought that has gone in, I think has really been beneficial and puts us in a place where we are now. So it does show, as the city manager pointed out, that when you make the proper investments, you can turn that into more interest and revenue. I would just want to note that my hope would be that this will continue, of course, and that there's maybe a possibility of keeping the momentum up with relation to the 125th anniversary that's coming up. So I'm hoping that maybe there'll be some opportunities there, and maybe under the Golf Advisory Committee's guidance to work with the Public Information Officer and others, Concord TV, and really talk up what we have there, the improvements that we've made, and maybe garner some additional interest in membership coming up. But great work to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? try not to be repetitive. Just simply want to say that I concur with other people's comments, and that I happen to be out there twice in the past 2 days. Once for a reception at the restaurant area, and also today at the pro shop. And one thing I noticed, the consistency was, I think the tone that the pro, Mr. Davis, has set in terms of customer service has been absolutely top notch. I think it's better this year than I think I remember it ever being. So that experience that the player has makes them want to come back, makes them want to buy something in the pro shop, and makes them want to have other events, whether it be use of the tent or inside. So I give credit to the whole staff, but I think Mr. Davis has really set that tone. The second thing is my hope, and I think the hope of the council for the facility to really become a year-round center is really come true. And I think if you remember back and look at the manager's newsletters on Fridays, the pictures of folks who are skating, the pictures of folks who are cross-country skiing, it really has become a year-round facility, as well as the simulators inside. So from going back several years where we were talking about whether we were going to sell this to build houses on this land, to today and seeing the use and the enjoyment of the folks in Concord, I think it's everything we've wanted to happen has happened. So well done to the whole team. Seeing no more questions regarding golf, we ready for the arena?
So you want item number 9, the Arena Fund, and you want to be on page 148. And as a general note, the Arena Fund suffered significant revenue reductions as a direct result of the governor's executive orders on arenas across the state. There were complete closures for periods of time and significant capacity reductions, and basically no dry floor events during the summer of 2020. With these difficulties, I commend Jeff Bardwell and his staff the continued efforts to manage the arena operations and keep things moving forward in these unprecedented times. Jeff has also, as I think some of you are aware, formed the New Hampshire Rink COVID Coalition Group, which provided important information to the governor's economic reopening task force. Jeff's leadership in forming the coalition and the group's input to the reopening task force was recognized by the Northeast Ice Skating Managers Association Board of Directors as one of the most effective groups during COVID pandemic in New England. For fiscal year 21, revenues budget to estimate are down $191,000. These revenues are down almost in all categories. The main reductions being pro shop sales, concession sales, and rental income. Expenses budget to estimate are down $44,000 as a direct result of Jeff's efforts to manage the expenses due to the pandemic and reduce the revenue. So he was able to really trim where he could. For fiscal year 22, revenues budget to budget are down $2,400, or it's nearly flat. Expenses budget to budget are up $36,000 or 5.4%. That's due to increased wages, debt service, and transfers out to overhead. You'll note the reductions in the supplies and utility sections. This budget is anticipating the arena operations will be nearly back to normal during fiscal year 22. And then you'll want to go to your pro forma tab. And the budgeted projected for net for fiscal year 21 was $12,000. I'm estimating a projected loss for 21 of $135,000, again, due to the COVID reductions and related to closings. For fiscal year 22, I'm projecting a loss of $26,000. And while there's sufficient working capital to cover the projected loss through 23, starting in 24, the Arena Fund will likely need some general fund assistance for operations and any significant capital improvements. Again, this is very similar to where the golf course was several years back, or not that long ago, actually. Again, Jeff and the staff have done a great job, and especially under the circumstances of the last 16 months, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Last questions, Councilor Fancy.
Thank you. This is probably for Mr. Manager. how is the outlook for, I guess, dry floor events this summer? Is it looking okay, better than anticipated, consistent with what we anticipated when the budget was made?
Let me see if I can answer that, but I'd rather have somebody who's dealing with it on a regular basis. The floor events look like they're all coming back, and we've had a number of folks where some of the people who were running the floor events and the programs weren't able to continue doing that and decided, you know what, I'm going to retire, I'm going to get out. But other people have picked that business up and are doing it. So it looks like to me like it's going to be pretty good. It'd be pretty steady. So it's not like we should experience a major loss there at all. And it could grow over time. But as one of the things that, as you know, Counselor, the council's talked about this in the past, there's only so many dates you can fill. And then once you run out of those dates, there's only so much revenue that can come in.
Mr. LeBrun, before I recognize Councilor Keach, you have Mr. Chesley in the attendees who wants just to make a comment. You want to bring him in? Mr. Chesley, did you have your hand raised?
Yes, we did.
Welcome.
Just to reiterate what Tom was saying, the dry floor schedule looks promising from a revenue standpoint. Looking forward. Jeff Barbell's here with me as well. If anybody wants to ask any questions specifically of Jeff.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Keach.
Thank you, Your Honor. More of a comment. I would encourage the arena committee to view that operation in the same vein as the golf course and just identify some possible unrealized potential and possible investments that would turn that around.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Manager, where would you like to take us now?
We want to be on item number 10, Solid Waste Fund. So you'll want to be on page 152. And revenues budget to estimate are here. I'll let you get there first. Revenues budget to estimate are down $293,000 for fiscal year 21, and that's due to commercial disposal sales being short of budget. Expenses budget estimated down $381,000 due to lower outside service expenses related to those sales being down. So again, revenues down $293,000, but expenses down $381,000. So for fiscal year 22, revenues budget to budget are up $30,000 or less than 1%. Expenses budget to budget are up $37,000 or less than 1%. The only new item that I've included in the budget proposal is $13,600 for dumpster pad rentals, fees to be paid to the parking fund. They've been using those parking spaces downtown for years, so it makes sense that that take place. And if you would go to the pro forma, the projected net line here at the bottom of the page shows a budgeted loss of $166,000 for fiscal year 21. So you purposely budgeted to have a loss of $166,000. The fiscal year 21 estimated loss is $78,000. So it's performing $88,000 better, the $88,000 better than you had planned, with both revenues and expenses doing better. For fiscal year 22, I'm proposing a budget of $174,000 loss, and the ending working capital is able to absorb this and stay significantly ahead of the 10% expenses target, which you can see down the bottom. I want to remind the council that the first 10-year period of the contract with Casella expires in fiscal year 24, and we'll be negotiating a contract extension or otherwise, and expect increased costs at that time, especially with what is occurring in the recycling world today. So as we look around at new contracts being worked out with different folks, the costs are going up significantly, particularly related to recycling. You essentially have the best recycling deal of the state, if not New England, we won't be able to replicate that again, I'm sure. For this pro forma, also projects a 25% pay-as-you-throw bag increase in fiscal year 23, which we have talked about for several years now, and 23 was the target year. SWAC, Solid Waste Advisory Committee, will be working on this issue as well as the contract provisions over the next year. Also, there's a 10% bag price increase in fiscal year 25 as a placeholder, so we're not really sure. We'll look at that when the time comes. And obviously, I'm going to ask that SWAC continue to work on that. Overall, general services staff has done a fantastic job with this. You can see the fund, and Adam Clark has been largely responsible for a lot of this. It's doing much better. It's doing well to begin with, but it's even doing better than expected. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Who has questions? Okay, seeing none then, we'll move on to our next item. I believe that takes us to our enterprise funds.
Correct. You'll want to be on the water fund, which is item number 11. And you'll want to be on page 157. Okay, so this was a little bit different than last year because I'll try to explain this and stop me if I get you confused. So for the water and wastewater funds, you're going to have 4 ordinance changes proposed and 1 report from General Services to consider on June 7th. This is concerning the annual rate changes and then the overall rate structure changes with the Fiscal Policy Advisory Committee has recommended and the council has been asking for us to do this year. Bringing all this together so that the council has a complete picture of the issues instead of doing it piecemeal. The rate changes are the annual increase considerations and increase in the amount of funding in each of the funds. So this increase goes into effect in September during the years the city council makes the rate change. So if you vote to make a rate change, it doesn't take effect until September, which gives people time to get ready for it. The rate structure change does not increase the overall revenue in the fund, and it brings both the funds into line with the industry best practices, which Fiscal Policy Advisory Committee has asked for, and to allocate fixed charges for both funds. Currently, the wastewater fund does not have a fixed charge. The fixed charge will be based on meter size, and the water fund, the minimum usage charge as part of the fixed fee will be eliminated. That's one thing that you've asked us to take a look at. And the customers will pay for only the water that they actually use. The overall net revenue for each of these funds, due to the structure change, will be neutral. Neither fund will bring in any additional revenue based on the structure change. The structure change will go into effect in July 2021 and is also needed as part of the implementation for the utility module we're doing with the new ERP system. So again, the rate change is to raise additional revenue. The structure change is to align the city's system with best practices and does not bring in any additional revenue. So with that, does everybody kind of get the gist of that? And then I'll go into it in details with the water and wastewater fund. Okay, I know most of you have seen this before, so I just wanted to make sure you're aware this is where it's happening. So for fiscal year 21, for the water fund on page 157, revenues budget to estimate are up $189,000 due to additional water usage that has taken place. Expenses budget to estimate are up $87,000, mainly due to full-time wages and benefits, contractual costs. For fiscal year 22, revenues budget to budget are up $129,000 or 2%, a reflection of the rate increase that will go into effect in September. Expenses budget to budget are up $199,000 or 2.9%. These are mainly due to benefit changes and outside services. So let's talk about that. So there's four PCRs included in this budget. $20,000 for the water fund portion division to cover the cost for division head labor grade adjustments, which I presented earlier, $2,400 for chemical compliance testing, so these are required regulations, $7,700 for chemical cost increases, and $8,200 for training. So remember when we ended up stripping out a lot of the training and all the other departmental budgets, and you have some money, if you approve it, in the manager's budget to be allocated to those departments as needed. In the enterprise funds would need their own dollars in their own funds. So this is $8,200 to look at, just be for certifications and for trainings in the water budget. And if you go to the water pro forma, you'll see the projected budget loss for fiscal year 21 was $425,000. And this is obviously so you could keep the rates down. The projected net estimate for loss for 21 is $323,000. So the fund is going to do $101,000 better than what we had budgeted for. For fiscal year 22, we're projecting a loss of $494,000. And if you follow the ending working capital line all the way out to fiscal year 27, which is the last column, you'll see the plan increases each year. The ending working capital for fiscal year 27 is $2.2 million, and that's slightly ahead of your target of $2.1 million at the very bottom. And again, I'm recommending a 3.5% rate increase for this fund, and be glad to answer any questions.
Councilor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. City Manager, I hope I didn't miss it, but with the structural changes, does anything happen with the irrigation rate, or is that covered under wastewater? The special rate that isn't tied to wastewater?
That would be under, well, because you're being charged what you're actually using, so the low end users will actually experience the greatest savings. The higher end users will see that paying for that cost. The savings really would be in the wastewater end, but I think you might be able to get a better detailed answer from if Chip or Dan are there. You want to go, if Chip could fill that in.
Certainly. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Basically, what you use for irrigation, you'll be charged the same as what you'd be used for inside your house. As we've built the ordinance, we have identified the irrigation rate as a separate and distinct rate. So if at a later time you wanted to adjust it in either direction, you can. But at this point in time, we have just identified it and kept it flat, as has been the practice for a number of years here in Concord. Marco is in the room with me as well, in case people have some questions of Marco. He'd be happy to chime in.
But again, just a follow-up, if I may. But again, this irrigation rate has nothing to do with the wastewater rate as it does in your house, correct?
Correct.
Your domestic, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Mr. Manager? You want to unmute yourself there, Tom?
I missed the little square, sorry. You want to be on item number 12, which is the wastewater fund. I need bigger buttons on this. So starting on page 161, you see for fiscal year 21, the revenues budget to estimate are up $211,000, and that's mainly due to increased leachate and septage processing that we do down at the plant. Expenses budget to estimate are down $197,000 due to lower wages and benefits and lower utility costs. For fiscal year 22, revenues budget to budget are up $322,000 or 4%, due to the increase in the sewer service charges and leachate septic processing. Also note that revenue for shared revenues is zero, based on the state reduction for state aid and grants. So again, that's back to, we'll see what happens, but based on what we've seen with the state, they're going to renege on their costs for covering some of our capital costs. But they may decide to backfill that with other dollars, so we'll find out. But right now, we're anticipating no money for this year or no money for the next year. Expenses, budget to budget, are up 200, and for fiscal year 22 are up 228,000 or 2.7%. And that's mainly due to wage benefit increases and increases in outside services. And let me talk about the PCRs here. There's $19,000 for division head labor grade adjustments for the wastewater position. There's 6,000 positions. There's $6,000 for the Loudon Road sewage pump replacement work. There's $15,000 for the Pennacook valve actuator replacement. There's $12,000 for a part-time equipment operator that's dealing with sludge. There's $5,000 for hazardous gas detection equipment, and $5,100 required for training, very similar to the water fund. You need to budget dollars in the wastewater fund if we want to do training. And then you want to go to the pro forma. And if you're looking at the pro forma, you'll notice that the projected net budget loss for fiscal year 21 was $411,000. So you had budgeted for a $411,000 loss in this fund. The projected net estimated loss now is $3,700. So actually, we're doing $408,000 better than budgeted. For fiscal year 22, I'm budgeting a loss of $317,000. If we follow the ending working capital to fiscal year 27, the last column of the pro forma, the ending working capital with the projected increases is $2.9 million. We're right on target with the working capital target. Again, we're budgeting an 8% rate increase in the wastewater fund, and I've talked about the reasons for that. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Before you do, I just noticed that Councilor Kennison is actually in the attendee section. Ms. LeBrun, can you bring her in, please? Okay, thank you. So who has questions regarding this section from the manager? Okay, seeing none. I'm going to wait till Councilor Kennison gets in, and I'm going to give her the opportunity to ask any questions on any of the sections that, if she wishes. LeBron, is that possible?
I did just promote her to a panelist, and it seems as though she dropped off once I did that.
Okay, I still have her in the attendee section, so.
Just click the button again.
Okay. Mr. Manager, while we wait, that concludes our budget presentations. Is that correct for this year?
That's correct. There she is.
There we go. Councilor Kennison, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Perfect. There you are. Welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome. So I apologize I didn't see you in the attendee section earlier. I'm sure you listened to the budget presentations, but I wanted to give you a chance to ask any questions if you so wished.
No questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that. So that does conclude all of our sections of the budget. Take a review. We are supposed to meet again on June 7th. The purpose is to have a public hearing. We're going to do a little work session. But I asked you at the beginning of the meeting if you wanted to go ahead and to try to adopt a budget on Monday, or would you prefer waiting? And if we chose to wait, I was going to suggest probably the 21st, because the committee conference, although the legislature will have not voted up or down on the budget on the 24th, they will have adopted a committee conference report on the 17th. So it's what's the pleasure, Councilor Warner?
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. I was just wanting to get maybe some additional perspective as to why we would wait. Is there a compelling reason or things that are going on in particular as to why we would wait?
In the past, we've done it because there were some outstanding discussions in terms of revenues and funding of like bridge aid and other type of water type stuff. This year, it doesn't seem to be so much, although there may be some additional revenue in the rooms and meals tax going back to communities. But I don't think it would ultimately, my personal opinion is, and Mr. Manager, feel free to correct me, or Ms. LeBrun, that would really affect the decision we would make if we did it on the 7th versus 21st. It wouldn't make any difference. I think what you'd find is we set the tax rate in the fall, and they could come back and inform us of what they're doing and what they've learned. So in other words, it's not going to affect the tax rate ultimately where we would come down. So to your point, I don't think it would make much difference. Mr. Manager?
I agree with the mayor, and I think if anything significant came in, I could immediately bring it to the city council. You know, you'll have a meeting on the 14th, you'll have a meeting in July, you'll have a meeting in August at least. And then you could make if you wanted to make a change of some sort, then you could. But I don't see anything between now and, as the mayor said, the timeframe when the budget could get approved by the state that's really going to affect anything that you'd be doing on the 7th.
Councilor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we waited until the 21st, would that allow the public to become more involved in person? I don't know if we've thought about when we're going to start meeting in person and having public hearings, but I know that's been one of the problems in the past is people being able to speak their mind and so on and so forth in a public setting. So I don't know if that would weigh into our decision at all.
I tell you, Councilor Hawkins, you're going to go next, but I just want to comment before we move on. Everyone should have received an email from our city solicitor today regarding the governor's last extension of the executive order, emergency order, for 14 days, not the typical 21, I think it was. So we're going to, if the governor does not, if he does not do an additional extension, then we would be generally required to meet in person on the 14th, the June 14th meeting. So if you wanted to hold a public hearing, if we're going to do our public hearing on the 7th, so that would still be by Zoom. I don't know how much more access it would give members of the public. My personal thoughts is I would always yield to the idea of giving people more time to be able to participate. But I don't know that unless you want to hold the public hearing on the 21st, then that could be in person if the governor takes no action. Hopefully that made sense. Councilor Rice-Hawkins, hopefully you can clean up what I tried to say.
You covered part of what my question was, because I know we had talked earlier about potentially having physical space for part of the public hearing. So I was curious where that stood. I would prefer to have the vote, though. It doesn't really matter to me if it's the 14th or 21st, but I would prefer a little bit of time after the public hearing to digest any of the comments that we receive. So I would opt for a week or two afterwards. Thank you.
Is it Councilor Fennessy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to raise sort of the same question that Councilor Rice Hawkins had raised with respect to, I know I raised at one point, I think some other people, perhaps Councilor Pierce, raised the potential of having an opportunity for the public to participate in person at the June 7th public hearing. I'm wondering what the appetite would be to have some sort of an in-person public hearing on the 14th. And then act upon the budget either that night or on the 21st if the council wants additional time.
Well, we have a regular city. I would shy away from the 14th for any of the budget discussions because we have a full agenda, regular city council meeting on the 14th. So I think it's best we preserve that night for our city council meeting. And we do have several items of public hearings and action phase. So how about this? If the goal is to try to include as many people as possible, what if we were to skip the June 7th meeting, not hold a public hearing that night, not do the budget adoption, and simply do the hearing and the adoption on the 21st?
Sounds like a plan to me.
I would agree with that too.
That sounds good.
Councilor
Thank you, Mayor. I do prefer a little bit of time between the public hearing and the vote. Again, just if there are things that people bring up that we want a chance to explore or discuss further. But I would be fine if we did the continued through with the 7th for folks who'd already planned for that, and then offered a second opportunity and a final vote on the 21st. And I think we did that on a previous budget, right, where we've done a couple of opportunities in the past.
Yeah, we've given people the opportunity to speak after every single section, which we did not do this year. So if we did not cancel the 7th, if we met on the 7th, that would be by Zoom. That would be virtual. If we do it on the 21st, that's going to be in person. And so am I understanding you're suggesting doing both? So 2 public hearings, or am I misunderstanding?
Thank you, Mayor. I would say, yeah, continue through with the 7th where we would expect to get the bulk of testimony. And then if there's anybody else who would like to speak but needs to be in person, do it on the 21st.
So Councilor Hawkins is recommending 2 public hearings. Councilor Kennison?
I prefer the 21st, having the public hearing and acting on the budget. If there are things that need further review, we can delay it for a week. But generally, we have enough information so that we can act on the budget after a public hearing. And I think it would be great to have people to be there in person to testify. So that would be my preference.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Councilor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we go with the 21st, and just to follow up on Councilor Kennison, if something came up in the public hearing that bothered us or we wanted to research further, could we continue the finance committee meetings and vote on it at a later date? Or does it have to be voted on by July 1?
So I could probably try to recite the charter and the adoption. We're going to make it really easy and say we want to adopt this by the end of this fiscal year.
Okay. So we could, if something came out in public hearing, we could continue it. We could do a council action, or we could say we've heard nothing and we can go ahead and vote on it.
So how about this? We're going to keep spitballing here. If the concern is that you want to have a public hearing and then you want time after that to hold a second public hearing and then take action, then what if we were to do the hearing in person on the 21st and then we were to meet on the 24th, the Thursday, because that's typically what we've been doing is Mondays, Thursdays. Meet on the 24th for the final adoption.
That's fine with me.
Sounds good.
That sounds reasonable.
I prefer we get it done on the 21st.
I mean, I feel like we're going to be doing this for the next 5 minutes or 50 minutes. Are there serious objections to the 21st and the 24th?
I have availability issues on the 24th, but I am free on the 21st and ready to go.
So let's gonna make this real quick. Who would like to do hearing on the 21st and potential adoption on the 21st?
I would.
Yeah, I support that.
Okay, so by my quick, just look around the windows of tiles here. Why don't we plan, it appears we could plan on for not meeting on the 7th, having a public hearing on the 21st, and potential taking action on the 21st. If there is a significant, here's my one caveat. If there is a significant amount of public testimony, if there is considerable change being considered, then let's reserve the 24th for a alternate potential for action on the budget. We don't have to use it, but we can reserve it. And depending on what happens on the 21st, we'll make the decision then. But in terms of informing the public, we will be saying the public hearing is on the 21st. Public adoption, budget adoption will be scheduled for the 21st as well, but we reserve the 24th if necessary.
I think that's a good compromise, Your Honor.
Am I reading the room correctly, or is that, Mr. Manager, do you want to blow that up now, or?
No, I was fixing my sleeve.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, did I hear one or two counselors say that they could not do the 24th?
I had one with a scheduling challenge and the other just preferred not to.
And a third with a scheduling challenge.
I do have a scheduling conflict.
Now up to 4.
And I would note TPAC did move its meeting last month, and it is scheduled for the 24th of this month. As somebody with district business at TPAC.
So again, we're not meeting on the 7th, and we'll be meeting on the 21st. Okay, I appreciate that. And I encourage you all to go back and to read the solicitor's memo regarding how to move forward, for participation. There is the opportunity to call and do a conference call if that's the choice. And we just need to have if I understand it correctly, we needed to have a physical quorum present, that's all. And then if somebody else didn't feel comfortable, they can always participate by phone. That is absolutely acceptable, no problem. And it is by phone, it's not by Zoom. Potentially in the future, we may be able to do Zoom, but we don't have the ability to do it right this second. That's the challenge. So it's not like it wasn't, the administration really tried to make that happen. It's just not, it's not technically possible at this particular moment. I have Councilor Madsen and Councilor Fennessy.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I had my hand up because I was voting for the 21st. I take it down.
Okay.
My apologies.
No problem, Councilor Fennessy.
Thank you. I just had a question with respect to if we're operating under the assumption that we'll be meeting on the 14th, is the plan that we will be meeting in council chambers? And do we have any plans with respect to whether people will be required to wear masks or not wear masks or anything like that with respect to both members of the council and the public who may show up?
I'll give it a first shot. Mr. Manager, feel free to correct me if I misstate, but it's my understanding we'll be meeting in the council chambers on Green Street. We have no mask order in effect. I would hope that if you're not vaccinated, you would consider wearing a mask. If you so choose to wear a mask, then I encourage you to do that. And if not, there's no requirement.
That's correct. And the city clerk and I are going to look at the spacing out of the chairs in the audience. And I guess I could leave it if the counselors don't want to sit around the table, or some counselors don't want to sit around the table next to your neighbor for whatever reason. We could kind of lay out a little bit different spot for you, separated from everybody, and we'll try to keep everybody isolated if they can be, and obviously have an area for the public. One of the things that we may need to do is generally, you'll notice during these budget meetings, I have all the relevant staff available in the meeting room to be able to take any questions. If we do that, we won't have any room for public. So I'm going to have to figure out some place to have them offsite or on phone or something else. So that way, when the public shows up, there'll actually be physical spaces for them to be able to enter the room. So the city clerk and I are working on that very soon.
That's what we're talking.
Just a question, City Manager. Have we not considered using the community center or another space like that, or does that present technical challenges?
We have this community center next to City Hall. The Green Street one does not have the ability to broadcast live, cablecast live. The only other place that we really do is over at the city-wide community center over on at the Heights. An issue there is related to the sound system. So we have a new sound system that has been installed at the city council chambers, but we don't have the same type of setup over there. So you're going to have sound issues related to the community center to be able to have a meeting. We could do it, but we think we can make based on the public attendance that we see at budget meetings. There should be plenty of room to space out at the council chambers.
Any further questions? Or okay, everybody good? Everybody know the plan? Okay, great to see everyone. Councilor Grady Sexton, since we are not getting together on the 7th, I want to say happy birthday to you right now. How's that?
Happy birthday to you too.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a great night. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Right.